donated hardware, and one of the things over time was the hardware wasn't necessarily updated, nor the OSs, and people they got sort of out of whack. And then there was a problem, and then because they actually started mirroring data from one location to another location, the problem replicated, and then someone thought they were able to fix it, and instead of copying stuff, basically did the equivalent of RM minus RF slash. And so they're trying to get all that back fixed. And so the only reason I mentioned
I was told down in the lobby, so downstairs.
is because that has now affected people. And that's one of the reasons we ended up moving our website off a few years ago and our mailing list again a couple of years ago, because just did not have the resources or the ability to keep the thing up to date, secure, and the best. So that's the whole history of Tux.org, but in theory, John and I are impacted, or only John is impacted or knows about it. I've moved all my stuff off.
If however you have some administration skills would like to help set things back up and put paddles to it.
Yeah, so John's in the back with the DrupalCon shirt with the Crack Liberty bell. Talk to him about it. Again, one of the things that used to be a problem, and I think just as it's gotten easier, although based on the mailing list, some people may not agree, to install Linux, getting skills in real-time experience always was a problem for people. So there are people who wanted to move from whatever other environments they were working and get Linux skills. One of the things that Tux.org did was offer people real hardware and real world applications for the chance to do some sysadmin and to get some mentoring. So anybody who may be interested, John can talk to John, and like I said, we can definitely use some help there. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Sean. I want to thank Sean. At the end of last meeting, he told me that he had to give a talk coming up, and he thought it would be great to be able to sort of give a preview here today before he had to give it at work, I think next week.
It's actually opposed to you.
Sorry?
It's opposed to you. I did it on Tuesday.
Oh, congratulations.
So, yeah.
You standing ovation, raise the whole
It's a little bit different of an audience, but I thought it would track well here too. So
excellent. Good. Well, now I'm going to turn it over to Sean.
So hi everybody. My name is Sean McGowan, and you may have seen me here before. I've come for probably about 8 or 9 years now, I think, to this LUG, but I kind of lurk. I've been a lurker in most places, and I've always wanted to talk, and I've always wanted to give back. And I used to do trainings back in Space Ops years ago, and I just never really had anything I felt like I could talk about here. My current position, I'm a director of systems engineering out at a SaaS company in Sterling, and because it's a small company, I think I'm like employee 30 or somewhere around there. Not only am I doing the whole architecture and the migration to AWS, but I'm also doing a lot of the hands-on ops work. And as a result, if you guys are familiar with the enterprise bus test, it's what happens when Sean gets hit by a bus on the way to work, and who knows how to backfill his job. So I came up with this presentation to specifically for some developers who are very specific in their skill set, in order to explain a little bit about how ops works and how we're going to be automating our system. So basically, I started out by explaining what was going on, and then I kind of delved into our own infrastructure. I changed a little bit of the ending for that to come here, but I thought it'd be perfect because we generally have a lot of disparity in terms of skill sets here. So it's going to start out really basic, and we're going to start out by explaining what some of the background is, and then we'll get into some examples. Can everybody hear me back there? Given the light situation, I know we have sharing the screen on the Hangout right now, so you may consider signing up for the Hangout if Peter sent out the link, and that way you can see the screen closer when we get into the terminal stuff. You may or may not be able to see from the back, so just a suggestion if you want to do that. And without further ado, I will get started. So what's this about anyhow? We're just going to make a case for using provisioning tools. So what is provisioning? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what the various tools are, and then we're going to give a simple example. provisioning to supply with provisions. It's a very, you use the word in the definition, right, for a JRMDA. It is basically just getting the things that the system needs from top to bottom to get it to run, right? Just automating, making repeatable processes. What is provisioning? We're going to talk about the historical background and the concepts. We're going to talk about the modern app architecture. We're going to talk about some deployment strategies. We're going to talk about configuration management. We're going to mention infrastructure as code. I'm clearly not going to go into all these topics. They're like a single slide. This is so we all have the same kind of vernacular while we're talking. Any of these presentations I could go all day on, right? So let's get moving. So in the beginning, people had servers and they hand jam them, right? They go on and just like a lot of people do at home, and then they go and they install a package here, and then they move this over here, and oh, you got to call the sysadmin guy, and he's got to install this package, and he jumps on, he does a yum, or he does an apt-get, or whatever, and configures the system, right? I need to access some sudoers, and somebody will go jump up and hack the sudoers file. You know, when you do that and you want repeatable things and environments, everybody started developing some shell scripts, and shell scripts kind of, you know, got passed around, and things got a little bit easier. Starting systems from scratch, we had Jumpstart for Solaris. If anybody ever worked with Solaris systems, we had Jumpstart servers. Kickstart was the answer to that in the Linux realm. I think it's even out in Debian now, right? Kickstart Debian. But it was a Red Hat thing that allowed you to take from the install from scratch and get to where you want it to be. AutoYast was the same thing, just for a different. More automation. So then we had Cobbler, which coincidentally the writer of Ansible also wrote, I believe, which was templatizing Kickstart files and being able to start things from Bootstrap, from bare metal, and that sort of thing. We got systems management tools, and there's a list of them. I only put Spacewalk and Satellite on here since I'm in Red Hat building. But I think they're going the way of Foreman now. I think it is. I'm not familiar with it, but basically it would work with Cobbler. You can manage things because it's great to be able to bootstrap your system from scratch. But then, like I said, somebody needs the sudoers file changed, or somebody needs SSHD changed, or somebody needs, you know, this configuration changed. How do I manage the systems after the fact, right? When we got virtualization, we got the concept of the golden image, and all these things don't go away. They kind of build on one another. So you might kickstart a server in a virtual world, and then snapshot it, and now that's my base image for everything else. It ended up having a little bit of problems depending on how you do it, because if you start too much and if you put too many things on it, let me say this, and then the image changes, now I have to go back and I have to update the Kickstart file. From the Kickstart file, I have to go back and update the golden image, and you end up in kind of a configuration management hell. It can be done. It's just about putting the right processes in place. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The idea of idempotence is any mathematics majors out there? Any mathematicians? Yay. So ring theory, right? And kind of group theory, rings or multiplying matrices. You talk about an idempotent element, right? And the idea is if I multiply it with this element, I get the same result, right? Likewise, when we're doing systems and we're doing configurations, we call things idempotent, which means if I go, and I'll give the sudoers example again, let's say I want to include the sudoers.d directory, right? I want to make sure that entry is in the file. If it is in the file, don't do anything. If it's not in the file, go ahead and make that change for me, right? And that's the idea of idempotence. You know, don't do anything if you don't have to. So let's talk about a little bit about the modern app. We have a software as a service. We talk about SOA, right? Service-oriented architecture, or microservices, as the cool kids call it today. We have 12-factor, and I know Greg's talked about 12-factor before. I'll kind of give you, if you guys don't know and you're developers, I don't want to get in depth into it today, but the website here is 12-factor. That does applications, because you can't do it just from one position, right? Ops has to know how to roll things out, but the app has to work, right? You can put things in the virtual world, and if it's monolithic, you can't scale correctly, you can't do a lot of things, you can't take advantage of what's out there. So this is a great read here. It primarily runs on like, decoupling your layers, data from logic, that sort of thing. Processes, how you're going to run them, logging, what you should do with them, this sort of thing. It's a lot of best practices. It's a great read. So 12factor.net. And it started over. It's not supposed
We
to do
lost
that.
your two in here, but I'll just take from that, see if it works.
Come again?
Drop from the meat.
When I'm near the screen, I drop in the meat?
Yeah.
Oh, that is beautiful.
But let's just, I'll recall from that and see if it works.
Okay. Where was I? All right. So we'll talk about like deployment strategies now. When you get out into the to large architectures, we have the idea of rolling upgrades, we have the idea of canary upgrades, and we have the idea of blue-green. So rolling is basically I take a couple servers out of the pool, I upgrade them, I put them back in the pool. I take some other servers out of the pool, I upgrade them, I put them back in the pool. Right? Sounds pretty cut and dry. Canary upgrading is a step up from that. You just leave them in the pool a little bit longer, or you control how many people can see it, right? The canary in the coal mine is where the phrase comes from. If I'm upgrading something, I might do it on one server, soak it for a little while where a certain amount, I think the slide shows the Facebook employees is where I grabbed it from, can see it. Then we add it to a few more servers where we're giving maybe 5 or 10% of the people access to it, right?
Is it also kind of like A/B testing?
No, sort of, but A/B testing often happens across.
Marketing.
Yeah, but canary is more like hopefully it just doesn't blow up and die, right? But yeah, it's a very similar concept, and in fact, canary is kind of like a rolling upgrade if you think about it too. You're just kind of leaving it in the pool for a little bit longer and not just marching through. But yeah, so the idea again is you throw it out on a couple servers, soak it for a little while. If it doesn't up and die, then you can roll it out to the masses. The idea of blue-green upgrades is really cool. Something that you can do, but with the physical infrastructure, it just becomes a cost, right? You have to provision all these hard servers, whereas in the virtual world, it becomes very, very simple. So the idea behind it is, and this shows an entire app structure in this, but you don't have to do it that way. You can simply do it with the web app layer or web layer, depending on how you're done. But you just provision a separate set of servers with your new build on there, or whatever, your upgrades, and then you just flip the load balancer to point to the new set once you're convinced it's working. So that's how we do this stuff nowadays. And configuration management is a process by which product's various attributes are consistently maintained throughout its life cycle. That's the military definition, right? Anybody who's worked for big companies or space, especially that has a heavy military influence, will know that you have to get everything boarded. All your changes have to be written up and boarded and signed off by X number of people. The same concept gets applied to things like code, right? If you've used Git before, or Mercurial, or Clearcase back, Atria, if you did. But anyway, Subversion, right? SCM is the term I'm going to use for it. If you hear me saying it, I'm referring to that today, not supply chain management. And it handles the changes in software or in software projects, right? That's all it does, right? It gives you a history. Makes it easy to manage the software project from top to bottom. Server configuration management, same kind of thing, but we're managing the configuration of the servers now. We want to be able to recreate everything, right? Nothing in somebody's head, right? Everything's written down and stored somewhere in a repository. Infrastructure as a code. When we start talking about using these tools, we can actually put our entire environment and our server configurations into code, and also now into the SCM, right? And that's kind of the idea behind all this. This is the Wikipedia the definition here. Infrastructure as a code is the process of managing and provisioning computing infrastructure, processes, bare metal servers, virtual servers, etc., and their hardware configuration, or the use of interactive configuration tools. And it starts over again. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Anybody have any questions about definitions or anything I'm talking about right now? Sweet. So to top that off, we talked about, how things were done. We talked about, what types of things we need to configure, how things are set up. Am I not on there anymore?
Something way at the top of the screen.
That's just this menu. There you go.
Hey. All right, so we talked a little bit out there. I kind of like the hammer, the Maslov hammer, right? When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, is what they say, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to have the right tools. And again, we're going to describe some of them here that are out there. We have AWS Cloudformation, Terraform, and Heat. Those top three are used to describe your entire virtual environment, right? AWS Cloudformation is a JSON markup of your environment that you're deploying out to Amazon. Terraform is the same thing. It's done in YAML. And Heat, I believe, is the OpenStack version, trying to emulate the Cloudformation. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's right.
Packer is a utility that we can use once we provision once we decide on the configuration. We can build images for different platforms. So if I want to build an image for AWS or I want to build an image for an OpenStack deploy, Packer's a great tool for that. I mentioned Vagrant just because I'm going to be showing it to you later, but it's a great tool for development in your CI/CD pipeline, right? If you're doing continuous deployment, continuous integration, continuous deployment, it allows me to create an identical environment that my developers can work off of. That's exactly like or very, very close to what I'm going to deploy on. Kind of that warm fuzzy feeling, right? Because deployment shouldn't be a big deal, right? If you've done the work, you've done the work before. Deployment should be, right, just deployment, right? Just get it out there. We got Chef and Chef Solo, Puppet, CF Engine, SaltStack, and Ansible. Those are all for generally used for the server configuration. I've never really used Puppet, CF Engine, and SaltStack too much, so I can't really speak to those. Ansible has the ability to also provision hosts from scratch, which I don't really play with because I generally use Terraform, but you can do that sort of thing as well. So we're going to talk about Ansible today, and a little bit about why I'm excited about Ansible. Ansible, I used it when I was with another large company that was stuck on old Solaris 10 machines, and we weren't getting any money to be able to upgrade them, right? The contract was that we just weren't getting the funds to upgrade the legacy systems. And so how do I manage these, right? Because I was in an entirely hand-jammed bash script environment, right? And when I came back there, they wanted everything automated. I went through some of the tools that were available, and with the dependencies that some of these other tools need, such as Puppet and Chef, for example, make it a little difficult to install on older environments. Whereas the version of Solaris I was using, I just had to compile Python, which only took me 4 or 5 days to figure out how to do. But once I got that done, the beautiful thing about Ansible is that it's all over SSH, right? Everybody else works over these proprietary protocols, and it's fine if you're using like a small environment. But when you start talking about we had 1,200 plus servers, you're talking about a lot of different networks, a lot of traversal, a lot of different NATs and things like this. SSH, I can simply do it, right? I don't have to go ask everybody's permission. I don't have to go write all these, CRs about why I need this particular port open and port forwarded or whatever. It's SSH. We have 22 open everywhere, right, from my management LAN. So it's very easy to deploy. The other consideration, and the whole reason I used Ansible there, and the whole reason I'm using Ansible where I am now, is like I mentioned, there's not a lot of ops people where I am right now. So if you write in Chef, I don't want to say Chef's hard, it's not, I like Chef, but it's in Ruby, right? And so you're going to be doing Ruby and with an additional DSL on top of that. So if you don't have people who can speak that language, it becomes very difficult for them to read. And when you add on the top that a lot of times the developers aren't as savvy with rolling out servers and what the configurations should be, you lie, right? Then it becomes very advantageous to put something in a simple markup language. And that's what Ansible is. Ansible is a simple, it's just YAML. I saw a lot of people on the Python group, coming here today. I don't know if you came in thinking, hey, Sean's in the school, you're someone Python. I'm not. There is zero Python in any of my examples today. It's all in YAML, right? And that's the beautiful, beautiful thing about it. You just describe what you're doing and you move forward. So Ansible getting started. You guys definitely, if you want to try it, check out docsansible.com. There's an intro, getting started, everything else. There's everything. There's good documentation on it as well. And I should also say this: if you guys aren't ops people or you're not developers, you're not looking to roll out an environment, we see a lot of things on the mailing list and things like, oh, I need to upgrade this server from something to something, and I have to do all these packages and stuff. Just put it in a configuration management. Just mark it up in YAML and then run your Ansible across your servers. Very, very simple to do. It seems like it's a little extra time to get spun up, but the amount of time it saves you with that investment in the future is unreal. For a long time, and I'm a dork, I had all my Arch Linux servers at home being provisioned, Pixie booting, and then running Ansible to get them started. Just because as much as I love Arch, the install process gets old over time. So, sir.
That's interesting, because I have had these problems of trying to provision multiple Arch servers.
With what?
Multiple Arch servers, provisioning them.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there a way you could show us what the sort of script or something to use it?
You can actually, yeah. I'll show a couple things. They're more server oriented as the examples I use in a few minutes. If you do use Arch, you have to tell Ansible about the Python path because it uses Python 2, and Arch defaults to Python 3. But that's all actually in the documents as well. So on the front page of getting started, it tells you about an Arch installation as well. So it's pretty simple. And like I said, you don't have to get into. I'm going to show you some of the different things and some of the different ways you can organize Ansible. But if you're doing it at home and it's using it for file management, or you're using it for package management or something along those lines, or both, it's incredibly flexible with how you can do it. Just you can make it as simple as you want. You can make it as complex as you want, right? That said, I will say if you have like some complex things, oftentimes it's easier to deploy in Chef because you have the ability to do Ruby. But Ansible overall, I'd say is a great product. So we're going to talk a little bit about you have the concept of an inventory file and ad hoc commands is what we're going to start out with. So when you install it, there's going to be an Ansible command, and basically you have the inventory file. So if you see up there on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see mail.example.com, and then you're going to see web servers, which is a group, and then 2 servers listed under that. Very, very similar to INI format. It's been around forever. Very easy to mark up. You can also mark up, groups of groups if you want. So server, certain groups of groups. They're called children, I believe, is the vernacular, and then the word they use in the documents. So depending on how you want to deploy, how you want to group your servers, you start out with an inventory file. Ad hoc commands. Here's a few. Once you install Ansible, you can install Ansible --help, right? That'll give you everything that you can do with it. Ansible all -inventory file tells you where the file is. The all part is just really a pattern. Okay, so where I say all there, it's a pattern. It's anything that can match in that inventory file, right, that you see on the right. So if you said Ansible web servers, it's just going to grab the web servers out of there. Or you can even provide a pattern, right? If I had, what's a good pattern in there? E, right? You could get E. Well, no, E is bad for example.com, isn't it? Anyway, you can put a pattern in there and just grab the servers that you want out of your list if you choose to do ad hoc commands. And the last, we have the -a, which actually runs a command. So if you have a large infrastructure and you need to run a command across all hosts, well, that's a heck of a lot easier than running a for loop and doing bash real quick, right? You also run different modules. There's a lot of modules it's delivered with. So when I don't have the -M in the second command there, it just assumes the command module. It just assumes that I'm going to be running command. Yes, sir.
So I stepped out for a minute, so if you covered this, you don't need to answer the question, I'll get it later. So we define these servers, right? And I'm running this Ansible command, and it looks like it's connecting to these other servers and running this command. How do you set that? Do you talk about how to set that up or how that communication works?
It's all over SSH.
So do I have to set up SSH keys, or how?
So I don't talk about it in the presentation, but yeah, effectively you want to have keys out there is the easiest way to do it. So you deploy keys. I use SSH agent for that. So what's
You can do
that?
it without keys.
You can.
Yeah, you can do it without keys. You can use a flag that it gives you sudo privilege, and you can actually have it prompt you for your SSH password and then your sudo password before it actually does any of the connection to the remote hosts. So you don't have to set up SSH keys, but it definitely facilitates things if you set up SSH keys.
Yeah.
As long as you have
And most,
sudo privileges.
and most cloud environments will allow you to inject a key during install anyway.
Correct. So generally, to today's point, what I would do when I was deploying, across a large number of hosts that were already there that didn't have my keys, is you would write a one-off to go everywhere and install your keys, and then run your playbook with my keys. Is generally how I would do it. But there's, approaches may vary.
In the info doc, the very first page that you're getting started?
It's either on the getting started page, or it's on it's one of those pages right there. It even goes as far to give you a brief intro into using SS Agent to manage your keys and things like that, which is nice. If you don't know how to do that, I highly recommend it. So the second one, the third command there, just wrote, you can do the -M module. So not only do you have the option to do a command, but you might want to do, yum or something like that, or apt-get, or make sure there's a certain particular line and file. There's a module called line and file. These things make your life a lot easier, right? So rather than writing a command with a sed-i and hopefully I get it right this time, you can just use the line and file module and you're good to go. It really helps as far as anybody that's had too many slashes in an SSH command or backslashes.
You say you've got the Ansible all and saying applies to all the machines.
Say again?
You got Ansible all and that's saying applies to all the machines. Is there a way to say apply this to a group of machines?
So correct. So what I was saying earlier is the all there I put in that command is really a pattern. So everything in the inventory file defaults into an all group. So if I say all, everything, it's going to be applied to everything in that inventory file. If I said web servers, like I had web servers in this particular example, which I copied from the website, it would only grab those 2 web servers. If I said DB servers, it would only grab those 3 DB servers. If I said, food.star or something like that, it would only grab the food, you can put a pattern there, you can put an explicit server in there, you can put a group in there, it's very flexible. You can also do, there's a, I don't remember the option at the time right now, but you can also limit the servers that you get. So if you said all, then there's a flag that you put later and actually filter out what you wanted to run from there. There's also the concept of tags, which would only run things on a particular subset of commands when we talk about playbooks here in a hot second.
Quick question back on the prior slide on the inventory file. So let's say I wanted to have, I'll just call it 2 levels, right? So I may want to have all my Linux machines together, and I may want to have my web servers. And so could I have food.example.com listed in 2 areas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other way to do that, if you wanted, was to, like I mentioned, you can do subgroups. So if you had a group of web servers and you had, or you have different locations, is a great way to group things as well. For example, I might have, my East region, my West region, that sort of thing, but they're all web servers, right? So they can go under that subgroup. With respect to operating system, you could do it that way, but I don't have the example in here. But there's examples on this site where you run it across all, and then there's a command or there's a markup called group by, right? And by the Ansible OS distribution or whatever, and then so you can run a subset of things on your Linux hosts. versus your Windows host versus, whatever.
And running,
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah.
and including it twice, when you say all, it's not gonna run the command twice on that machine. If I have a particular web server in both the web service group and say the front office group,
Right.
and I say run this Ansible all, it's gonna only run it on that web server once, not once because it's in the front office and then once because it's a web server.
I would think so. I've never actually configured it that way, so that's a simple test that you can let us know if you find out the answer. I would think not, but really it shouldn't matter if you do your if you do your commands or you do whatever you're running correctly. The idea, again, back to idempotent actions, it shouldn't matter how many times you hit that same thing on that server, right? You should get the same result every single time, right? So that's not always true. There are certain things that you can't do that way, but that's what we're really striving for.
The command module is not idempotent. The shell module is not idempotent.
Correct. So if you use a command line or you do a shell command, it's not by default idempotent. That's what he's saying, which is pretty obvious. So whatever you're running, either you make it idempotent yourself, or you just live with the fact that it's not, right?
And it may be idempotent, but still, if you run it twice, then you've got twice as much downtime for that particular server.
That's another possibility, right? So it depends on what you're doing. But right now, when we're talking about doing the things on, you're talking about running an ad hoc command. Hopefully, if you're taking downtime on the server, you're going to use a playbook, even if it's a one-off playbook, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So.
What I was going to say is that if you can tell certain package or copy certain package, you can check if it's already there because it's already there. Because it doesn't even restart it.
Right.
Okay.
May want to repeat it. I don't think that's going to.
So I think if I heard correctly, what was just in the back of the room was that if you're looking for a package, for example, then you just, if you run the Yum module to do that for Red Hat or EL, you would say, hey, is Vim Enhanced installed, right? And if it is, you don't do anything, right? You just move along, or it's not a big deal. So it's not a big deal to run these things multiple times if you have to. So to what John was saying back there is that there's if you're running a lot of stuff where you're doing like a rolling update or something, you probably you want to avoid taking the same server out multiple times, that sort of thing. Those are considerations you'd have to make, and I'd be interested in if you try that test. I don't run that way, so I don't know the answer to that question. Oops. All right, let's do this. So this is a little example of what we talked about so far. Yeah, because I haven't shared it yet. Don't worry about it.
I gotta know, man.
All right. And I guess having the links up ahead of time doesn't really work because I have to resize them when I share the screen, so bear with me. So here's an example, and this is using a Vagrant box again on my host. So this is, for those of you not familiar with Vagrant, this is bringing up a Vagrant box. Can you see that? Or does that need to be larger?
It needs to be larger. Larger would be great.
Can I do that?
Be able to hit Apple Plus. Apple Plus. Apple Shift Plus.
Yeah, not when I share the whole screen, I can't. Let's
It's definitely not coming to on the camera.
yeah, it's weird that.
Well, you can narrate it, that would be fine too.
Oh, yeah, that works. Just start reading, man, fast. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
I'll just do it this way without sharing the whole screen, or maybe it will work if I do this now. Yeah, it does. Okay, cool. All right, so where were we? Let me back it up a little bit. So this is bringing up the Vagrant box. Again, if you're not familiar with Vagrant boxes, this is actually not working because I can't see the bottom of the command line.
So in this case, basically what he's doing is creating a virtual machine in VirtualBox.
Correct.
He's using the Vagrant command to be able to build that machine hands-off at a high level.
Right. So, and to be clear, all that's in this Vagrant file is just bringing up a CentOS 7 box. That's all it's doing, right? It's the bare minimum image from CentOS. You get them off HashiCorp for free. CentOS puts its own images up there now, which is lovely. And so the first time you run it, it downloads the box, and then you're good from there. And you can do it across a lot of different operating systems. They have a lot of different things up there. So if you're a developer or you're a tester, you can write quick little scripts that'll run things across the swath of operating systems. You can make sure they work, which is really beautiful.
Sorry, what was the source?
HashiCorp. If you go to Vagrant, I think it's vagrantup.com, I believe is the site. But if you Google Vagrant or search engine Vagrant, you'll find it. VAGRANT.
Right.
And
So HashiCorp is
HashiCorp makes
Vagrant.
HashiCorp makes Vagrant. They make Packer. They make Terraform. And they have a really cool tool out there now called Console, which I just started playing around with. But for your purposes, Vagrant is what I'm doing right now.
Okay, but I meant the place that had the repository.
There's a link. There's a link from there, but yeah, again, search engine it's atlas.hashicorp or it's something like that is where it is. They have a product called Atlas that they sell that manages a lot of the images and things like this. But they have a lot of the images there for free. I think it's atlas.hashicorp.com, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
It's not an error message.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So here's Ansible Help, right? Just like I said, it just dumps out all the help information. Again, this is an ASCII terminal. We're going to do the version. I'm running 2.0.1 at the time of recording this. I've actually upgraded to 2.1 since then because there's a Yum repository module that I love now. That's just showing you. I grepped out the IP address from my Vagrant file just to show you what I'm using. I assigned it the static IP for the purpose of doing this, so I didn't have to go look for it. So now we're going to grep out the IP from standard in, which totally doesn't work. You can grab it from SSH just to show you how I'm doing this, because I wasn't using the SSH in agent at this point, or no, I was, but I was turning off strict host key checking in general for virtual machines. Usually I have something, if you're familiar with SSH config, if you're working with virtual machines, it's just not an Ansible thing. It's just a good practice to take your private IP addresses and write that host file to def null, because otherwise, the next time you go back to an IP address when it's not the same machine again, SSH is gonna scream at you. Anyway, that's my SSH configuration. I just want to show everybody that. And here, I'm gonna run something. Let's see what I did.
We're going to build a host file.
So here we just catting the host file, which I'm not sure why I did that. Oh no, this isn't the real host file. You see, I wrote just the IP address into a file called hosts.
That's your inventory.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I'm like, I put the domain into my real host file, which is why I got confused for a little bit. So anyway, so I cat that host file just to show you that IP address is there. So that's a simple inventory file, right? That's all it is. I'm kind of showing you a little bit about how to set this up for Vagrant, and then I'm going to show you an easier way to do it with Vagrant. But this is knowing this will let you do it to other hosts as well. So again, launching SSH agent, a bash shell, right? So I'm going to run a specific shell for SSH agent, so I can add this key, right? This is where Vagrant keeps the key, just so you know. It creates one, it injects it into the machine if you didn't see the log messages coming through. So you have a different private key for every feature, or for every server. If you are running a lot of Vagrant things, this is on a Vagrant topic, since I think 1.7, somewhere around 1.7, you could actually tell it not to do that, and you could use the same Vagrant key across multiple hosts, which if you're doing a lot of different Vagrant boxes at the same time makes life a lot easier. I generally don't configure it that way, but that's available. So here we go. So I added the identity to my SSH agent. So now I don't have to worry about being able to SSH in. And I'm going to run Ansible-I, right, with the inventory file, looking at the host file. I'm going to come in as user Vagrant, because user Vagrant on a Vagrant box has full sudo permissions. and I'm going to run ping, which is the example they use on the Ansible site. All right, and ping isn't like a traditional ICMP ping. It's just more like a hey, you know, I got a connection, and you have all the utilities that you need for me to run at this point in time, right? So, and let me talk about that too. The only requirement that for bootstrapping Ansible is Python 2 and simple JSON, right? And so simple JSON was the default JSON package. Python guys give it to me 2.5, 2.6, somewhere around there, right? So most of the time, if you have Python on your machine, you're good to go, right? There's no getting the chef packages installed or getting the Puppet client installed and, you know, worrying about manifests, you know, getting delivered to it and all these things, right? It's super simple. It's just SSH. So I did something wrong here. I said error missing targets. So let's see what I changed to. Oh, I didn't put the pattern in there. So that was the error in my last command. So I'm going to put all, it's going to grab that one IP that's in my host file and run the ping. And we're going to see it's a JSON response, right? That's all it is. It's going to give me the IP and success. If we're going to run that across a lot of hosts, you would get a list of all the hosts that you were pinging. It tells you whether or not it was changed. Again, we talked about whether, you know, when we're running things, we want to know whether or not it changed, whether or not it had to make a change. So you get that data with every single thing you do with Ansible, whether or not it changed, whether or not it was skipped, whether or not it was, you know, whatever the result was. All right, so this is running an ad hoc command. We're just going to run hostname. I probably should use full path for that, but I was lazy. But anyway, so we just run it across all hosts again, user vagrant, and we run the command hostname. It returns the hostname, right? All right, so here I try to grep my user out of the FC shadow, and that shouldn't work, right? And we want to make sure that doesn't work. That's in red, which is tough to see in the dark. But if you don't see it, it says grep FC shadow permission denied. So that's actually the standard error from the command that I ran, and that's what the command module is returning to me, right? So I couldn't do it, and here's the standard error, so you can do something with it if you want. And the reason that didn't work is because user vagrant shouldn't be able to cat out or grep out or look at the FC shadow file, right? So how can I do that if I wanted to do that for whatever reason? You add the -- sudo on the end. I think you can also use become now, right? I use become in my playbooks is the new way to do it. For some reason, when I'm the ad hoc commands, I don't do them as often. I still type -- sudo, but that's all it does. It runs sudo for you if you have sudo permissions when you get there. And so we should see the correct result come back there. And so we can see vagrant, it's at MD5, right? And whatever. So there you go. Okay, so now we're going to install Vim Enhanced. And I don't know why I picked this package because there's probably too many packages here to make it good for a demonstration. What's that?
Vim Enhanced is awesome.
It is, but it has a lot of dependencies with it. And when you just bring up a Vagrant box that hasn't been updated yet, it's going to take a little while. So I'm going to try to fast forward that a little bit. Just bear with me. So there we go. So it's almost done right there. You'll see the results. And that's all, again, all in JSON. So you're seeing the /ins there from what was installed. But there's us verifying that it was installed, right? Just the yum info. And now we're going to make sure it's present and it doesn't do anything, right? Because it's already there. And that's what I've been talking about. So we run the same command again. I don't need to do anything. And actually, it looks like it runs yum in this particular case because yum itself does that for you, given by the standard out here. One nice thing, if you notice the results, list right here is that it has the standard out in there, so you can get the whatever you're performing if you need to figure something out when you're doing a more complex playbook. Now we're going to say it's absent. It's going to go and uninstall it for me, right? Super easy. I run absent again. it says I don't have to do anything because it's not there. So super easy example. Go ahead and get rid of that box. What's happening? All right. If I have a tappy hand or this thing comes up to wrong. So we're going to talk a little bit about gathering facts. It's called the setup module. Anybody who's done anything, you know, you're going across a lot of different machines. Machines are different, right? You might, how do I tell, you know, what the IP is if I'm configuring a file or something like this? So what Ansible does is actually, prior to going and making a run in a playbook run, is it actually goes out to the machines, and you can turn this off, or but it goes out and gathers facts, as they're called. Yeah.
Can you describe the difference between ad hoc commands and playbooks?
Yeah, I'm getting to that actually. So I keep on using the term playbook, so probably that's something we should flip flop if I ever do this again. But yeah, playbooks are the idea of taking a lot of different commands or a lot of different tasks and putting them into a playbook, right? So you don't have to sit there and type Ansible dash, you know, whatever dash m is, you know, young, make sure it's installed. All right, make sure it's configured. All right, now make sure it's started and enabled. And what happens if I configure? Oh, now I have to run, you know, a restart, right? And this kind of pattern that you do when you install any kind of service. So the idea of playbooks is to automate all that. So it's taking these individual tasks and putting them into a list as you want them executed. Setup module describes the facts for that. So you want to know about that machine. You know, what's its public IP address, what's its private IP address, what's its MAC address, its BIOS information. It's
You can use the setup module return information for conditional statements and playbooks. Is that right?
again.
So, for example, if you wanted to run something on this system because it's got this version of the OS as opposed to not running on these systems.
Right. So that's what I mentioned to Greg earlier. Is things like the group by, right? I can group by Ansible OS, or I can I can say, hey, if it's, you know, like if it's CentOS, do this. If it's Red Hat, do this. If it's you know, Ubuntu, do this. There's a lot of different things you can do based on the facts of the machine, and that's specifically what it's for. So Ansible.config, I'm going to show you a little bit about Ansible. That's the overall config file. You can do things like turn off host key checking. You know, again, I'd mentioned that in my SSH config files. Easy to do. I changed, like, you know, the Ansible managed or where your roles directory is, that sort of thing, which doesn't make any sense now, but just know that it's the master configuration file for Ansible. And then Jinja 2 templates. And the beautiful thing about it is when you start to do the Jinja 2 and you start to play with Ansible, you'll realize that all Ansible is YAML with a Jinja 2 overlay. That's it, right? Like you do your playbooks and you're putting Jinja 2 markup. If you guys are familiar with a templating engine, Jinja 2 is a templating engine. And it runs over and puts in what you want, puts it into the YAML, and then runs the YAML through the Ansible code proper, right? Very, very neat process, very simple. So here's going through all the things I just talked about.
Calce.
Yeah, so Ansible, if you have Calce installed, it will use Calce unless you tell it not to. And of course, we all love Calce because system administration ought to be fun, I believe, is what they say in the documentation. So here we are, bringing up the Vagrant box again. I'm going to fast forward through this. We don't need to see that. So you see right there, it's going to inject the key here in a hot second. All right, so here we go. So Ansible Help again, there's the help. Oh, wait, no, I'm running the same one. Let's do this one. So, okay, so in this particular one, I brought the box up for you, so not to put you through the misery again. We're gonna look to see if NTBD is installed. It's not there. And this is just proof of concept. The comp file is not there, so now we're going to add all the things to the key to the SSH agent. And that's just the setup portion. And here's the setup module. And I'm running this through a less, but you can see all the different things that are available from the machine. So that's if you run setup from the command line because you want to see what's available for you. You don't really run the setup module explicitly when you're doing playbooks. It just runs it for you, so you have these facts available to you. And the other nice thing to think about if you're talking about like multi-host deploys is you have if you run all in front of everything, you can gather facts about all the hosts. So maybe I'm setting up an HA proxy, right, and host in front of a series of web app or my web tier. I can deploy the HA proxy, and as long as it knows the facts about those web app tier already, I can make the HA proxy configuration in groups, from at provision time, which is really nice.
You use those facts and templates, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I'll show you some templates here in a second. So here's the host file. I'm just showing you these things in Vim real quick. There's my Ansible config file, right? It just has an Ansible managed host key checking false. Playbook retry means I screwed up. Always put retry and or git ignore. There's the YAML file. So let me pause this for a second. So this is the playbook. This is telling you what host to use. So I've had a group my servers in the host file. So it's going to go over all my servers. It's going to set these variables up, right, which is a list of NTP servers that are available, right? And it's going to say become yes, which means when I run this, I want to run these commands with sudo, right? Or whatever the default permission escalation is on the. So why they switched it to become, I believe. So if we look at tasks here, I'm going to say ensure that NTP is installed with the yum module, right? Name is NTP, that's the name of the package. The state is present, doesn't exist. Configuration NTP, right? So here's an ntpconf.j2, that's a Jinja2 file, okay? And it's going to, its destination is ntp.conf, that's where it belongs. Owner's root, group's root, and mode is read, write, read, read. So we're going to do that, and you see the notify hook that's going to restart NTPD if that configuration file changed, right? Because you want the daemon to go ahead and know about the changes. Now we're going to ensure that NTPD is running and enabled. So that's just a service, right? The name is NTPD. We're gonna do enabled yes and state equals started. There's a systemd module as well, which I could have used. I elect to use service most of the time still because CentOS has links or however they do service, just runs your system control in the background. But that's something to think about when we're talking about like deciding what to do based on operating systems. Handlers, this is defining the handlers called restart NTPD. And if you looked at the notify statement up there, it says the notify restart NTPD. That's going to run the handler, and that's all that happens, right? So, yes, sir.
So do you have to create these files by hand, or is there a way to make them based off some existing system?
I have a couple scripts that launch environments for me, right? Things I like to have, like make sure my git ignore is what I expect. Put in a vagrant file with some of the addition, that I prefer for my environment rather than doing a vagrant init. For the Ansible files themselves, the short answer is no. There is a certain topic called roles that I'm going to talk about in a minute. There's a scaffolding tool for that. So.
Short answer, no. Find one out there and modify it. Look at it.
So like Chef Cookbook sites, there's an Ansible Playbook site.
Yeah, so, and let me get to that. Can I answer that in a few minutes? There's going to be that's a topic coming up, don't worry. So here I am, let me get out of, I'm going to go to the template now. So let's look at the template. Again, this is just a Jinja2 template. It's a very simple markup language. If you look at the top, I'm going to print Ansible manage into the comment filter, right? Which is going to give me just when the file was modified, who modified it, where it was modified. Just tell it that it's Ansible manage. It's going to stamp that. I like that personally. The only disadvantage if you do that is that if you move the hosts or whatever, it's going to indicate change because that file now is getting distributed from a different host, and it's going to change the outcome of the comment. So if you're doing Ansible from a centralized location, it's cool. If you have a lot of developers doing it, then all of a sudden your templates are going to look like they've been changed when they really haven't. It was just the comment that changed. And I'll show you the comments in a minute, what happens. So this is a simple for loop, right? It's just for the server in the NTP servers variable that I showed you. Print out that server, you know, in that line. It's just a real simple markup language. And that's
Ginger, right?
It's Ginger 2, yeah. So was there a Ginger 1? I don't know. I say Ginger 2 all the time. I'm sure. Yeah. So what am I doing next here? I'm gonna run that playbook. So we talked about playbooks. So we have Ansible Playbook, right? -I is again my inventory file. Again, -u is my user, and then the playbook that I'm going to run, right? Which we showed you with playbook.yaml. So it's going to go across the host here. Again, if I had multiple group host servers in this host, it would go across. It would run all the servers by default concurrently.
It's 5 or 10.
I can't remember the default. I think it's yeah, 1 to 2.
Yeah, you can roll it up or down. If you want.
I work mainly on small environments now. When I was doing larger environments, it was much more familiar with the. We see it's ran the setup, so it got all this information, which we don't really need for this play, but we have it now. We're going to ensure NTPs have been installed. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because, again, the machine hasn't been updated, so it's going to take a second. And this was running really slow tonight. I don't know if one of my mirrors was down or what was going on. Normally doesn't take that long.
That's yeah.
And we failed for some reason. Oh no. This was me going, what the heck was taking so long? So I paused it and went in to make sure I didn't do anything stupid in my file. Turns out I didn't, so let's put it back in the foreground. And there, finished up. And the last part didn't take any time at all, right? You see at the end it ran the handler. That's because the configuration file was updated. So at the end of the play, it says I need to run all of these handlers, right? If you change SSHD, you change NTP, it doesn't do it immediately. It waits until the end. And the reason for that is because you might change multiple things that need to hit that need that to be updated. So you wait until the end of the thing. This is the results. So we're going to see that the file is now there, right? And if you look at the top, there's the managed portion, right? So if I took host out of there and I took user out of there, you know, that sort of thing, you might be better off if you're running in a multiple, yeah. But that template will change, and that's the only downside to doing that Ansible managed comment. Anyway, that's me digressing. So that's the configuration file. You can see that we put CentOS, the servers in there like we wanted to from the NTP servers variable. And we're going to make sure here system control status, NTPD is running. And we're going to get out of there. So now let's go ahead and do something a little bit different. We're going to change this here.
Got about 15
And
minutes
the
left
rest of
before I have
the
to shut down.
Okay. So Peter, while this is happening, you see I changed them to US, and now I'm going to run the job again. You're going to see that I ran it and nothing changed, other than and you see the other than the configuration file and the running of the handler. So you see 2 changes there, but didn't reinstall it, right? It didn't, you know, it's just very simple thing to do. So you guys bear with me. Peter just said I got about 15 minutes before he's got to cut the camera. So let me move on, and then I'll answer any questions anybody has afterwards. That was the end of this one. I don't know why it likes this. All right. So we're going to talk about this. Vagrant can automatically generate Ansible inventory and playbook parameters. So from here on out, I'm going to show you what I did to Vagrant, so I don't have to type in this command anymore. The Ansible Playbook command. You can get all you need about the Ansible Playbook command from the website or from typing Ansible-Playbook-Help. Roles are a great way to recreate reusable code. So include statements can help organize. Ansible Galaxy is a nice tool to create the role with all of its scaffolding, which is kind of what I was talking about. Ansible Galaxy init role name is what you run, and I'll show you that in a second. And tags are another good mechanism for reusable code and not having to create as many one-offs. So you can tag any fact or any task that you want. There's task-specific tags. Even if you apply them at the role level or an include file level, they're task-specific. And you can tag your different items as what you're doing, and I'll show you that as well. So we keep on moving along here. So here's the Vagrant file that a couple of things I added. I added a name to the box, and then I'm gonna add the Ansible provisioning, and I probably should share my screen. All right, so here we go. So we see in here I added the Ansible tutorial name to the box. Again, this isn't a Vagrant tutorial, so I'm not going to go over all the Vagrant stuff. But what I wanted you to see is I added Ansible in there. So now when I type Vagrant up or I type Vagrant provision, it's going to run the playbook for me. This is basically what that's saying. And that's more in the interest of time. So here we are bringing up the box. Again, let's go ahead and skip through that a little bit. All right, so now it's going to run the play. So set up my server, it's set up, NTP is installed. That's running the play with Vagrant. Now let's look at what actually happened, because I've changed some things. Again, making sure it's here. There's the inventory file that it created for me. So when I added that into Vagrant, there's your inventory file right there, and let me show you what it shows you. So the top line up here, if you can see where my cursor, where my mouse is telling the box that it is, right? And then a set of variable names. And the way that this is set up actually shows you what you had asked before, John, about having the host in the host file multiple times. That shows you it doesn't iterate over it twice, right? Because it puts the host up here in the all, right, in the all section, and assigns it a group of parameters, right, that Vagrant's going to be using, right? I'm port forwarding at 2222 to a local host to get to my virtual machine, what the user is, etc., where the private key is, and then it's also because I told it was going to be in a group. So to answer your question, it looks like yes, so you can have it in multiple places without running it twice. Cool. I'm glad we figured that out. So here I'm going to create an Ansible Galaxy command. So you don't need the parentheses here. I just didn't feel like CDing back, so I just did it in another shell. So Ansible Galaxy init, and then the role name, and it'll tell you that the role name was created successfully, and then it is going to scaffold everything out for me, right? So it creates a README, it creates a directory tier with all your main.yaml files that you can go edit. When you're running a role, again, a role is a great way to separate, things and make reusable code. Roles are also nice because you don't have to litter yourself, you litter your code with include statements, right? It's gonna run, it's automatically, when you call the role, it's automatically gonna run the tasks in main.yaml. It's automatically going to ingest the handlers in handler/main.yaml. It's automatically going to ingest the default variables in main.yaml. It's automatically going to ingest the variables in vars main.yaml. It's automatically ingest dependencies and meta and so on and so forth, right? A couple things about variables with Ansible on the variables page. Once you read and understand, how to use them, at the bottom of the page, there is a list of what do you call it?
Precedent.
Yeah, precedent. Thank you. Highly recommend you read that. That's really how we do things in Ansible, and grep-r becomes your friend. Anyway, that's the role. So let's show you a working example of a role. So here's my site.yaml now, right? It's just include the playbook. And now I'm going to include the playbook, and I'm going to have the group my servers become yes, roles equals common, right? I'm just going to call it a common role. And I'm going to show you that in that common role, I'm going to main.yaml, and I have dependencies NTP, right? So it's automatically going to ingest the NTP role in my common role. That means it's going to run NTP first. The reason I do it that way is, again, I told you it's a tiered kind of variables, right? So in the NTP role, I can define all of the defaults for NTP, the default vars, and then when I call it in my common role, I can override any of those variables in vars common. Does that make sense? Or the common vars, excuse me. And so that way I have reusable code, right? I can take NTP and I can apply it anywhere. And if I want differences on one platform than another, I can apply it at the appropriate config file level. But NTP will work out of the box anywhere I put it, right? And that's generally my strategy for creating these things. But here's the conf file. Here's I'm just showing you where these files are. The handlers got moved to handlers.main in the NTP role. The defaults got moved to default main. And I'm overriding it again in the vars main of the common role, and that's kind of what I'm showing you here. And here's the task. So this looks pretty much like my playbook did before, right? And there's the tags that I talked about as well. So I'm tagging all these things with NTP and NTP install, or so I can actually call those individually if I want. If I just want to run NTP, which is all that's in this book right now. But if it were bigger, I might want to do that.
So for instance, one of the things that I used tags for was I would have, the name of the command. So for instance, if I want to do NTP and everything run NTP, and then NTP would call NTP install, NTP configure, NTP restart. And then if I wanted to run just one of those three, right, or have that hierarchy set up, it's easy. So if I know that's already installed and I don't want to bother checking, all I want to do is be able to quickly do a restart. Then I have an NTP restart, so I can use that tag. Is that correct, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. It makes it easier. When you first start doing it, this isn't something you think about. It's just something over time comes to, oh yeah, this is what I would typically do is log into a box if I have a problem, try to restart a process, or get the status, right? So what you're doing is creating these tags as a shortcut to be able to do a typical sysadmin task.
Absolutely. So let me talk about, we talked about, I heard somebody say something about shared libraries like Chef. This is one of the downsides of Ansible, in my opinion. When I used Chef, Chef took on the Burke Shelf project years ago now, I think around Chef 11 maybe. They took in Burke Shelf. It was a best practices kind of way to use Chef. And it came with a lot of community libraries. Ansible's really lacking in that. In that regard, there's not a lot of good libraries out there now. There's some people doing them. If you play with this, I want to start contributing some of mine, hopefully pretty soon. I got some clearance from work to hopefully be able to open source some of the things that I've done. I did like an Elasticsearch stack the other day, just as a proof of concept, right? These things would be great to have out there as roles, right?
Have you taken a look at Galaxy, Ansible Galaxy?
So actually, I think that's on the screen that I'm not sharing. I got to start looking here. Lessons learned. Reuse across projects with Ansible Galaxy. So you can either get things from Ansible Galaxy. So if you go to Ansible, it's galaxy.ansible.com, and you can search through and see if there's roles available for your particular need, and they're distributed both by a star ranking, which seems to be inefficient right now, personal opinion, and also by operating system, right, by platform. So you can look for platform by particular things. Much like Bookshelf, actually, it seems like that more people contribute for Linux for Children than they do for the EL platform. Sorry, that's my stab at Ubuntu users. Sorry, 2 minutes, okay. So let me go ahead and run this real quick. There's a lot of things out there that you can do. I'm going to show you, you don't even have to get them from Ansible Galaxies. I think what I'm showing you in this particular one.
And see your screen.
Yep.
There you go.
So let's see what's going to happen in here. Rebuilding the Vagrant box here. While this is happening, if anybody does have any questions, like I said, we got 2 minutes, so I can sit around and answer them. Here I screwed something up, so I probably didn't feel like restarting the video because it was late at night.
I did this late at night.
I know, right?
Like last night?
No, like it was Monday night. I've been 15-hour days all week, so I'm kind of in rambling mode right now. Kind of need to hit me like a jukebox at some point. So here's the install roles I wanted to show you, right? So, oh, this was supposed to fail because I didn't have the role installed. So that's I want to make the directory called Galaxy Roles. I tend to keep my Galaxy Roles in the directory of whatever my project is, and I just put it in my git ignore. And the reason I do that is because if anybody here has used Bookshelf before, Bookshelf handles versioning for you. Ansible Galaxy doesn't. So if I have multiple projects that are using the same role, but I have different version dependencies and I haven't bothered to test them yet, whether or not I can upgrade all my projects, right? Then I don't want to have a centralized location for all my Galaxy roles. So this is the way I tend to do it. Your mileage may vary. But I'm going to install into the Galaxy roles and add the Galaxy roles into my roles path. All right. Thank you for those of you.
Oh, we can continue here. Online. But only one viewer, so.